Leon S. Kennedy doesn't make sense at first glance. On the surface, he's the poster boy for American action heroism, confident, capable, always ready with a one-liner even when he's facing down bioweapons that shouldn't exist. He's the guy who saves the president's daughter, who takes down entire terrorist cells single-handedly, who seems almost superhuman in his competence. But if you actually track his journey from that first night in Raccoon City through decades of Black Ops missions, you start to see something else entirely. You see a man who was psychologically destroyed at 21 years old and then spent the rest of his life trying to function while carrying trauma that would have broken most people within a year. What makes Leon fascinating from a psychological perspective isn't his competence. It's the fact that his competence is itself a trauma response, a survival mechanism that he can't turn off even when it's killing him from the inside. He's not a hero who happens to experience traumatic events. He's someone whose entire identity was built from catastrophic trauma and who's been refining that traumatic identity for over 2 decades, layering new wounds on top of old ones until there's almost nothing left of whoever he might have been before Raccoon City. Tonight we're going deep into Leon Kennedy's psychology. We're talking about complex PTSD that spans multiple incidents across 20 plus years. We're talking about moral injury from being forced to serve the same government that committed mass murder. We're talking about survivor's guilt that never resolves because he keeps surviving when others don't. We're talking about identity fusion where Leon can't separate himself from his work because his work is literally all he has left. And we're talking about attachment trauma, dissociation, existential crisis, and the slow motion psychological collapse of someone who keeps functioning long after he should have broken completely. I'll be rating certain psychological conditions on a severity scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is mild and manageable, and 5 is as severe as it gets, completely defining the character's existence and choices. This is going to be a long analysis, probably one of the longest I've done, because Leon's story spans multiple games and decades, and every single incident adds new layers to his psychological profile. So get comfortable, maybe close your eyes if you want to just listen, and let's break down what makes Leon Kennedy one of the most psychologically complex characters in survival horror history. The night everything ended before it began. Let's start with September 29th, 1998. Leon Scott Kennedy is 21 years old. He's just graduated from the police academy. He's been assigned to the Raccoon City Police Department as a rookie officer, and today is supposed to be his first day of work. Everything he's trained for, everything he's planned, is finally happening. He's probably nervous but excited, ready to prove himself, ready to start making a difference. But Leon doesn't actually make it to his first day. He arrives late to Raccoon City after stopping at a motel and apparently drinking away his nerves about starting a new job in a new city. By the time he drives into Raccoon City, it's already over. The outbreak that started days earlier has consumed everything. The streets are filled with zombies. Buildings are on fire. The police station he was supposed to report to is a massacre site. His entire career ended before it began. This is what I'm calling catastrophic initialization trauma. Severity level 5 out of 5. It's complete, immediate, and establishes a pattern that will define Leon's entire life. Think about what's happening psychologically in this moment. Leon built his identity around becoming a police officer. That's who he is, or who he thought he was going to be. He studied, trained, passed all the tests, earned his badge. He had a framework for understanding his purpose in the world, and within hours of arriving in Raccoon City, that entire framework is revealed to be completely meaningless. He's not a police officer responding to a crisis. He's just a 21-year-old with a gun trying not to die. There's no police department to report to, no commanding officers to give him orders, no backup coming, no procedures that apply to the situation he's in. Every institutional structure that should exist to support and guide him has already collapsed. He's operating in complete chaos with zero experience and no preparation for anything remotely like what he's facing. And it's not just scary, it's existentially destabilizing. Leon's sense of who he is has been completely invalidated before he ever got to actually be that person. This creates what psychologists call identity discontinuity, where there's a sharp break between who you thought you were and who you're forced to become. There's no gradual transition, no time to adapt, just an immediate shattering of self concept that leaves you scrambling to figure out who you even are anymore. Within the first few hours in Raccoon City, Leon watches people die. He's attacked by former humans who are now mindless, eating machines. He meets Claire Redfield, who's looking for her brother, and together they make their way to the RPD building, hoping to find safety or answers. They find neither. The police station is a tomb full of zombies and worse things, lickers crawling on ceilings, Mr. X stalking through hallways. Leon and Claire split up to cover more ground, and Leon's journey takes him deeper into Umbrella Corporation's nightmare. He meets Ada Wong, a woman claiming to be an FBI agent looking for her boyfriend who worked for Umbrella. Leon wants to trust her because he desperately needs someone to trust, some authority figure or ally who knows more than he does. He's attracted to her, drawn to her confidence and apparent competence, and she uses him, manipulates him into helping her access restricted areas, retrieve samples, all while lying about who she is and what she's really after. When Ada's true identity as a spy is revealed, it's another betrayal of Leon's fundamental assumptions. The person he trusted, the person he was developing feelings for, was using him the entire time. And then she apparently dies, falling from a significant height after being shot, and Leon has to watch that happen while being unable to save her. First day on the job, and he's already experiencing profound betrayal and loss from someone he cared about, but it doesn't stop. Leon encounters Annette Birkin, a scientist who reveals the truth about Umbrella's bioweapons research. He fights William Birkin, a man transformed into a constantly mutating monster. He takes responsibility for protecting Sherry Birkin, a 12-year-old girl whose parents created the virus that destroyed the city. And through all of this, Leon is just doing it. He doesn't have time to process the horror. He doesn't get to break down or question whether he can handle this. He just keeps moving because stopping means dying, and other people are depending on him. The climax of this nightmare is the government's decision to destroy Raccoon City with a missile strike. Leon, Claire, and Sherry escape on a train just as the weapon hits, and Leon watches through the window as the explosion consumes the city. The United States government just murdered tens of thousands of its own citizens, everyone who was still alive in that city, everyone who might have been saved, to cover up Umbrella's crimes and contain the outbreak. This is what should have been Leon's first day as a police officer. He never actually made it to work. He never met his colleagues, or learned the procedures, or went on patrol, or did any of the normal things rookie cops do. Instead, he survived a bioterror incident, watched hundreds of people die, was betrayed by someone he trusted, took responsibility for a child's safety, and witnessed his own government commit mass murder. Catastrophic initialization trauma, severity level 5. There's no coming back from this unchanged. The person Leon might have become, the regular cop with a normal career and a normal life, died in Raccoon City, along with everyone else. What emerges from that train isn't a rookie officer, It's someone fundamentally broken who doesn't know he's broken yet, someone who survived something unsurvivable and doesn't understand what that survival cost him. The invisible chains of blackmail. Leon's story should have ended with Raccoon City. He survived. He helped others survive. He could have walked away and tried to build some kind of normal life. That's not what happened. Instead, the U.S. government made sure Leon would never escape what he'd experienced. They made sure Raccoon City would define him forever. Shortly after the Raccoon City incident, Leon was approached by government agents. They knew about Sherry Birkin. They knew she carried the G virus in her body, making her a walking bioweapon sample. And they gave Leon a choice that wasn't really a choice: work for us as a special agent in Black Ops anti bioterrorism missions, or we take Sherry into custody and do whatever we want with her. Her safety, her freedom, her entire future depends on Leon's compliance. This is coercion, plain and simple, and it creates what I'm calling involuntary servitude trauma. Severity level 4 out of 5. Leon didn't choose to become a government agent. He was forced into it through blackmail, targeting his protective instincts. Remember, this is someone whose entire identity was built around being a protector, a police officer who serves and protects. The government weaponized that core part of his identity, used his need to protect a child against him, and trapped him in a role he never wanted. The psychological impact of coerced service is profound and well documented in trauma literature. When you're forced to do something against your will, especially when that coercion is ongoing and indefinite, it creates a state of learned helplessness. You recognize that your choices don't matter, that resistance is futile, that the power structures controlling your life are too vast to fight. This helplessness breeds depression, anxiety, and a deep sense of powerlessness that pervades every aspect of existence. But there's another layer here that makes Leon's situation even more psychologically damaging. He's not just being forced to work for the government, he's being forced to work for the same government that destroyed Raccoon City, the same administration that decided 100,000 American citizens were acceptable losses, the same power structure that protected Umbrella Corporation for years while they developed illegal bioweapons. Leon knows this. He knows exactly who he's working for and what they're capable of, and he has to serve them anyway, has to take orders from people he doesn't respect, has to protect systems he doesn't believe in, all because a little girl's safety depends on his compliance. This creates profound moral injury, which we'll get into more deeply later. But it starts here, with Leon being forced to compromise his values before he even fully understood what those values were. The training period between Raccoon City and Leon's first mission as a special agent was apparently rigorous. He learned close quarters combat, advanced weapons handling, tactical assessment, everything needed to operate as an elite agent. On the surface, this looks like the government investing in Leon's development, giving him skills that will keep him alive, but psychologically, it's something else. It's the systematic replacement of Leon's civilian identity with a military operational one. Think about it. Leon wanted to be a police officer, someone who serves a community, who helps people, who operates within legal frameworks designed to protect citizens' rights. That's civilian law enforcement. What he became instead is essentially a black ops soldier who operates outside normal legal constraints, who gets sent into foreign countries without official clearance, who handles situations through violence and covert action rather than community policing and due process. His entire value system had to shift. The ideals he held about justice and protection had to be retrofitted to accommodate extrajudicial killings, collateral damage, and missions whose true purposes he often doesn't fully understand. This is identity reformation through force, and it happens during a period when Leon is still processing the trauma of Raccoon City. He doesn't get therapy, he doesn't get time to heal. He gets turned into a weapon while his wounds are still fresh. By the time Leon is sent on his first actual mission as an agent, probably sometime in the early 2000s, he's no longer the optimistic rookie who drove into Raccoon City. He's someone colder, more controlled, more competent at violence. The transformation looks like professional development. It's actually dissociative adaptation, the creation of a functional persona that can operate in high trauma environments by suppressing the parts of himself that would break under that pressure. And here's the crucial detail: Leon never gets to leave. This isn't a military enlistment with a set term of service. This isn't a job he can resign from. As long as the government holds Sherry's safety over him, he's bound to whatever missions they assign him. Years pass, then decades, and Leon is still trapped in the same deal he was forced into when he was barely old enough to legally drink, still protecting a girl who's now grown into an adult researcher in her own right, still unable to say no because the threat against her has never officially been lifted. Involuntary servitude trauma, severity level 4. It's not quite maxed out because Leon does eventually gain significant autonomy and even authority within government operations, but the foundational coercion never fully resolves. Every mission he takes, every risk he accepts, every moral compromise he makes, all of it traces back to that initial blackmail. He's not fighting because he chose this life. He's fighting because he was never given a real choice, and by the time he might have been able to walk away, he'd become so defined by the work that he wouldn't know who he was without it. Operation Javier and the Impossible Girl. Sometime in 2002, 4 years after Raccoon City, Leon is sent to a South American village to investigate a former drug lord named Javier Hidalgo, who's allegedly using bioweapons. He's partnered with Jack Krauser, a veteran Special Forces operator, and together they infiltrate Javier's compound. The mission is fairly straightforward by Resident Evil standards: investigate, gather evidence, neutralize the bioweapon threat. What Leon finds instead is Manuela Hidalgo, Javier's daughter, a 15-year-old girl who's infected with the T. Veronica virus. Her father infected her deliberately to save her from the same disease that killed her mother. Now, Manuela lives in constant pain, her body barely holding together, kept functional only through regular organ transplants harvested from kidnapped victims. She's both victim and monster, innocent and dangerous, a child who deserves protection and a bioweapon that could potentially destroy entire populations if her infection spreads. This situation creates an impossible moral calculus, and it highlights what I'm calling the protector's paradox in Leon's psychology. Severity level 3 out of 5 by this point, though it will increase with each subsequent incident. Leon's core identity, even after all the government training and Black Ops missions, is still fundamentally built around protecting people. That's what drove him to become a cop. That's what made the Sherry blackmail so effective. He needs to protect people. It's not just what he does, it's who he is at the deepest level. But Manuela presents a situation where protection and neutralization are in direct conflict. The mission parameters probably include containment or elimination of bioweapon assets. That's what the government sent Leon to do. But Manuela is a 15-year-old victim of her father's desperation, someone who never chose infection, who's suffering constantly, who wants nothing more than to just be normal. Leon chooses to save her. He protects Manuela throughout the mission, helps her escape, and ultimately ensures she's taken into custody alive rather than eliminated as a bioweapon threat. This seems like an obvious moral choice. Of course, you protect the child, but within the framework of Leon's work, it's actually an act of defiance. He's prioritizing his own moral compass over mission objectives, risking his career and possibly Sherry's safety by refusing to follow the logical conclusion of his orders. This mission also marks the beginning of Leon's complicated relationship with Jack Krauser. Krauser is everything Leon might have become if he'd fully accepted the government's programming. A perfect soldier who follows orders, who sees targets instead of people, who's ruthlessly effective because he's abandoned the softer human instincts that make you hesitate. During Operation Javier, Krauser is injured badly enough that his military career effectively ends. He becomes resentful, bitter, and eventually turns against the government to join the enemy. For Leon, watching Krauser's fall is like seeing an alternate timeline, a version of himself that embraced the violence and coldness completely and ended up destroyed by it anyway. It's a warning he doesn't fully process at the time, but it's there, adding to his growing awareness that the work he does is fundamentally soul destroying no matter how you approach it. The Manuela situation also reinforces a pattern that will repeat throughout Leon's life. He keeps finding people who need protection in situations where protection is incredibly complicated. Ada needs help, but she's a spy who betrays him. Sherry needs protection, but she's a bioweapon asset. Manuela needs saving, but she's a walking contagion. Later, Ashley Graham will need rescue, but she's infected with a parasite that could turn her into a weapon at any moment. Leon's protective instinct never gets to be simple. He's never just the hero saving the innocent victim. There are always layers, complications, moral ambiguities that make protection itself feel like a trap. And each time, Leon chooses to protect anyway, even when it costs him, even when it puts him at odds with his orders, even when it reinforces his growing awareness that the systems he serves don't share his values about who deserves saving. The Protector's Paradox, Severity Level 3. It's significant enough to drive major decisions and create internal conflict, but Leon's still able to function within it. He still believes at this point that he can navigate the contradictions between his conscience and his orders. That belief will erode significantly in the years to come. Spain and the mission that broke something fundamental. In 2004, 6 years after Raccoon City, Leon gets assigned what should be a high-profile but relatively straightforward mission: rescue Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, who's been kidnapped by a mysterious cult in rural Spain. This is the kind of mission that can make a career: successful extraction of a high-value VIP, potential for recognition and advancement within the agency. Leon approaches it professionally, prepared for difficulty, but not for what he actually finds in that Spanish village. The Los Illuminados cult has infected the entire regional population with Las Plagas, parasites that take over the host's nervous system and turn them into mind-controlled servants. These aren't zombies, they're people who are still technically alive but puppeted by organisms that override their free will, and within hours of arriving, Leon is infected too. A plaga is implanted in his body, growing, slowly taking control, with a timeline that means he has maybe 2 or 3 days before his consciousness is overridden, and he becomes just another puppet serving the cult's leader, Osman Sadler. This creates what I'm calling the loss of bodily autonomy horror, severity level 4 out of 5, and it's psychologically devastating in ways Leon never fully processes. Think about what it means to know there's something inside you, something foreign and hostile, that's actively working to erase who you are. Every hour that passes, the plaga grows stronger. Leon can feel it happening, moments where his vision goes red, where his thoughts aren't entirely his own. where he loses control of his actions briefly before fighting back to consciousness. He's being colonized from the inside, and there's nothing he can do to stop it except complete the mission fast enough that he can reach someone who can remove the parasite before it's too late. This is body horror at its most intimate. It's not just about physical danger, which Leon has dealt with extensively. It's about the violation of self, the knowledge that your body is betraying you, that your mind is under siege, that the very thing that makes you you is being systematically dismantled by an invader you can't fight directly. And Ashley is infected too, which means Leon is responsible for protecting someone while they're both deteriorating, both on a countdown to losing themselves entirely. The protector's paradox reaches new complexity here. How do you protect someone when you might become the threat to them? What if the plague takes over and Leon becomes the one Ashley needs protection from? The mission forces Leon through a gauntlet of horrors. He fights through villages of infected cultists. He navigates castle sections filled with traps and zealots. He faces El Gigante creatures. Multiple times, these massive trolls that shouldn't be possible. He deals with the Verdugo, the Plaga mutated bodyguards who are barely human anymore. And all of this while carrying Ashley, protecting her, trying to keep both of them alive and conscious long enough to reach extraction. The castle section introduces Leon to two figures who complicate his psychology even further. First is Ramon Salazar, a childlike cultist who's grandiose and theatrical and completely insane, who treats the whole situation like a game. Salazar represents the banality of evil, someone who causes immense suffering not out of genuine malice, but out of ego and entertainment. Killing Salazar doesn't feel like defeating evil. It feels like putting down something pathetic that had too much power. Second is Ada Wong, who's alive despite apparently dying in Raccoon City 6 years earlier. She's working for an unknown organization, trying to steal a plaga sample for her employers. And Leon's response to seeing her again is complicated. Relief that she's alive, anger that she's let him believe she was dead for 6 years, attraction that he never fully processed, and the exhausted recognition that she's going to betray him again, because that's what Ada does. Their interactions throughout the Spain mission show how damaged Leon's capacity for normal relationships has become. He wants to trust Ada. Part of him probably still cares about her romantically, but he knows better than to actually believe anything she says. So they circle each other, helping when their interests align, working against each other when they don't, maintaining a weird antagonistic flirtation that passes for connection when you're both fundamentally isolated people who only know how to relate through crisis. Ada saves Leon's life multiple times during the mission. She also steals samples that will perpetuate bioterrorism. She's both ally and enemy, and Leon has long since given up trying to fit her into simple categories. She's just Ada, someone who exists in the moral gray areas that increasingly define Leon's entire life. The climax comes in the island facility where Sadler has been conducting experiments. Leon fights through more cultists, more monsters, more evidence of human suffering, industrialized and weaponized. He faces Jack Krauser again, now fully turned enemy, mutated and hostile, everything Leon feared he might become. Killing Krauser is necessary, but it's also fraught. This is someone Leon worked with, someone who understood the specific horrors of their work. Ending him feels less like defeating an enemy and more like mercy killing what the job does to people when they don't find ways to resist it. Finally, Leon confronts Sadler himself, who's mutated into a massive spider-like monstrosity. The fight is brutal, desperate, and Leon only survives because Ada provides support and eventually a weapon powerful enough to end it. After Sadler's death, Leon and Ashley get the plagas removed. They escape the island just as the entire facility self-destructs. Mission accomplished. Ashley safe. Parasites removed. Another bioterror incident neutralized. But something broke in Spain that Leon doesn't consciously acknowledge. The experience of being infected, of losing control of his own body and mind, of being responsible for someone else while both of them were being erased from the inside. That leaves scars that don't show up in mission debriefs. Leon's sense of self was already fragile after Raccoon City and years of coerced government service. Having it directly attacked, having the very boundaries of his personhood violated by a parasite, creates a new layer of dissociation that will only get worse. Loss of bodily autonomy horror, severity level 4. It's not maxed out because Leon does ultimately get the plaga removed and regain full control, but the psychological aftermath of that violation never fully resolves. He survived by compartmentalizing the fear, by not letting himself fully feel what was happening until after it was over. And once it's over, he doesn't give himself time to process it. There's just the next mission, the next crisis, the next reason not to stop and look at what the work is doing to him. The years between and the weight of constant deployment after Spain, Leon's career as a special agent continues through the late 2000s. We don't have detailed accounts of every mission he's assigned, but we know he remains active in anti-bioterrorism operations globally. The work is constant. Investigations, extractions, neutralizations. Some missions are successful, some aren't. People die. Leon survives. The pattern repeats. This period represents what I'm calling cumulative deployment trauma, severity level 4 out of 5 by the time we reach 2013. In military psychology, there's extensive research on what happens to soldiers who experience multiple combat deployments. Each deployment adds stress, each traumatic incident accumulates, and the psychological burden compounds rather than just adding linearly. Your first combat experience might cause manageable PTSD symptoms. Your fifth combat deployment, those symptoms have layered and intensified, creating complex PTSD that's significantly harder to treat. Leon's missions function like endless combat deployments. He's sent into active bioterror zones repeatedly, places where the situation has already collapsed into horror. He's never doing preventative work or investigation in safe environments. He's always arriving after the outbreak has started, after people have died, when the situation is already critical. Each mission reinforces the same traumatic patterns. He watches people die or get infected. He kills infected humans who might have been saved if intervention had come earlier. He faces new bioweapons that demonstrate humanity's ongoing capacity for creating worse and worse horrors. He interacts with organizations, both government agencies and private corporations, that prioritize profits and power over human life. And he returns from each mission without adequate recovery time, without processing what he experienced, immediately preparing for the next assignment. This creates a state of chronic hypervigilance that becomes Leon's baseline. He can't fully relax because relaxation means vulnerability, and vulnerability in his world means death. His nervous system is constantly primed for threat response. His sleep is probably terrible, disrupted by nightmares and the learned inability to fully rest when danger could emerge at any moment. There's also the weight of moral accumulation during these years. Each mission likely involves moral compromises, working with questionable allies, accepting collateral damage, following orders he doesn't fully agree with. These compromises individually might seem manageable, but they accumulate. Your sense of moral clarity erodes when you make exception after exception, when the gap between your values and your actions widens with each choice you make under pressure. Leon's relationships during this period are non existent in any meaningful sense. He can't maintain normal friendships when he's constantly deployed to classified missions. He can't date normally when his work is secret and dangerous and all consuming. The closest thing he has to consistent human connections are professional relationships with other people in the anti bioterrorism field. People like Chris Redfield and Claire. People who understand the work because they're trapped in it too. But even those relationships are complicated by the fact that Leon works for the U.S. government, while Chris and Claire have reason to distrust government organizations given their experiences with Umbrella's political protection. Leon and Chris develop a mutual respect, but it's the respect of people who've survived similar hells, not the warmth of actual friendship. They're allies who can work together when needed, but there's always distance, always the awareness that they serve different masters and might find themselves on opposite sides of a situation. By 2013, Leon has been doing this work for 15 years. He's 36 years old, has spent his entire adult life in anti bioterrorism operations, and has no life outside the work. No family except distant memories of Raccoon City survivors. No hobbies that we see. No home that's really a home rather than just a place to exist between missions. His entire identity has been absorbed into his role as a special agent. This is what psychologists call role identity fusion, where your professional role and your personal sense of self become indistinguishable. You're not someone who does a job, you are the job. And when that job is constant trauma exposure and violence, what you become is a walking wound that's learned to function despite never healing. Cumulative deployment trauma, severity level 4 by 2013. It's severe enough to completely dominate Leon's existence, to eliminate any life outside the work, to make normal human experiences feel impossible or irrelevant. He's still functional, highly functional actually, one of the government's most effective agents. But functionality isn't the same as health, and Leon's functionality is built on psychological mechanisms that are slowly destroying him from the inside. Tall Oaks and the betrayal that couldn't surprise. June 29th, 2013. Leon is assigned to Tall Oaks to assist with a campus bioterror incident that's escalated into a citywide outbreak. But this time there's a horrifying twist. The President of the United States, Adam Benford, has been infected and is among the casualties. Leon and his partner, Agent Helena Harper, fight through Tall Oaks as the city succumbs to the same nightmare Leon survived 15 years earlier in Raccoon City. President Benford's death is significant beyond the political implications. Benford was the president who employed Leon, who knew about Raccoon City, who was supposedly committed to transparency about Umbrella and government complicity in bioterrorism. He represented the possibility that the systems Leon served might actually change, might become worthy of the service Leon was forced to provide. And he dies infected, transformed into a zombie, requiring Leon to personally put him down. The symbolism here is devastating. Leon has to kill the one figure in government he might have actually respected, has to watch even the marginally good leaders get consumed by the bioterror machine. It's the final destruction of any lingering hope that the work Leon does serves a genuinely noble purpose. Helena Harper adds another layer. She's responsible for the Tall Oaks outbreak, not deliberately, but through manipulation. Her sister was held hostage to force Helena's compliance with a conspiracy led by Derek Simmons, the National Security Advisor. Helena made impossible choices under duress, and those choices led to thousands of deaths. Leon has to work with her, protect her, navigate, the mission, while knowing his partner, caused the nightmare they're fighting through. This creates moral vertigo. Leon's entire framework for understanding his missions has been built on protecting people and stopping bioterrorism. But Helena is both victim and perpetrator, someone who needs protection despite having caused massive death. Leon's protective instinct kicks in automatically, but it's complicated by justified anger and the exhausted recognition that nobody in this world is simply good or evil anymore. Everyone's compromised. Everyone has blood on their hands. Moral clarity is a luxury that disappeared somewhere between Raccoon City and now. As tall oaks burns, yes, another city destroyed. Leon and Helena escape and learn that the conspiracy extends further. Derek Simmons orchestrated multiple outbreaks globally, including in China, as part of a scheme to maintain power structures and eliminate rivals. Simmons is a perfect representation of everything Leon has been serving. Government officials who use bioterrorism as a political tool, who see human lives as acceptable losses in larger strategies, who perpetuate the very horrors they're supposedly fighting against. Leon and Helena's pursuit of Simmons takes them to China, where Leon teams up with Chris Redfield's team and witnesses yet another city consumed by bioterror. The scale of death in China is staggering, and it all traces back to people within the systems Leon has served for 15 years. The confrontation with Simmons is brutal and reveals the true horror of Leon's position. Simmons genuinely believes he's protecting national security, that his actions, no matter how monstrous, serve necessary purposes. He's not a cartoonish villain. He's what the system creates when you prioritize security over humanity, when you normalize bioweapons and outbreak management instead of prevention. He's the logical endpoint of the structures Leon has been enforcing. And the woman Simmons obsessed over, the woman he mutated and cloned and tried to possess, Ada Wong, or rather a clone of Ada, because the real Ada is also present, also pursuing her own agenda, also using Leon when convenient. The multiplication of Adas into real Ada and clone Ada creates a surreal psychological landscape where Leon has to navigate between versions of the same person who betrayed him 15 years ago, trying to figure out which one to trust and knowing the answer is probably neither. When the dust settles on the China operation, Leon has survived another nightmare. He's exposed high-level corruption. He's stopped a global bioterror conspiracy. And absolutely nothing has changed structurally. The systems that enable Simmons remain in place. The government organizations that perpetuate bioweapons research continue operating. Leon is still trapped in the same cycle, having risked his life to protect institutions that don't deserve protection. This is where I'd place what I'm calling existential futility. Severity level 4 out of 5. Existential futility is the recognition that your actions don't matter in the ways you need them to matter. You keep fighting, keep winning individual battles, but the war is unwinnable because the enemy is the structure itself, and you're part of that structure. Leon can stop individual outbreaks, but he can't stop the political and corporate systems that create outbreaks. He's trying to bail water from a sinking ship while the people steering the ship keep drilling new holes. This recognition that 15 years of service have accomplished nothing meaningful, that Raccoon City will keep happening in different cities under different names, is psychologically crushing. It invalidates his suffering by revealing it was never going to lead to positive change. Everything he endured, everyone he failed to save, all the moral compromises he made, none of it mattered. The world isn't better. If anything, bioterrorism is more sophisticated and widespread now than it was in 1998. People in states of existential futility often develop depression, fatalism, and dissociative detachment. They keep functioning because they don't know what else to do, but they've stopped believing their function serves any purpose beyond perpetuating itself. Work becomes empty motion, competence without meaning. By 2013, Leon shows clear signs of this. His one liners become more bitter. His expressions between missions are exhausted rather than determined. The optimistic rookie who believed in justice and protection has been worn down to someone who does the work because it's all he knows how to do, not because he believes it leads anywhere worth reaching. Existential futility, severity level 4. It's severe enough to pervade Leon's entire worldview, but not quite maxed out because he still takes action, still makes choices that suggest he believes individual lives matter even if systemic change is impossible. That thread of caring about individuals is maybe the only thing keeping him from complete nihilistic collapse. New York and the performance of normalcy. In 2014, roughly a year after the Tall Oaks and China incidents, Leon is called to investigate reports of a new bioweapon being developed in an abandoned facility in New York. The mission itself follows familiar patterns: infiltrate, investigate, neutralize the threat. What makes it psychologically significant isn't the mission parameters, but what happens during it, specifically Leon's interactions with a mysterious woman named Shen Mei, who appears to be connected to the facility. During this mission, we see Leon attempting something he hasn't really done since before Raccoon City. He tries to engage in normal human interaction. He makes jokes that aren't quite as dark as his usual gallows humor. He attempts casual conversation. There are moments where he almost seems like he's playing at being a regular person having a regular conversation, like an actor who studied what normal sociability looks like but can't quite inhabit it naturally. This is what I'm calling the performance of normalcy. Severity level 3 out of 5 by this point, though it will increase. The performance of normalcy happens when you've been in crisis mode for so long that you've forgotten how to actually be normal, but you retain enough awareness to know you should try. You go through the motions of casual interaction, but it feels hollow, performative, like you're wearing a mask of who you think you're supposed to be, rather than expressing who you actually are. For Leon, normal human interaction has become a foreign language he once spoke, but has mostly forgotten. He knows he's supposed to engage in small talk, supposed to express emotions beyond constant vigilance and controlled aggression, supposed to connect with people in ways that aren't purely tactical, but he doesn't really remember how anymore. The social muscles have atrophied from disuse. When Shen Mei flirts with him or attempts connection, Leon's responses are strangely wooden, like he's following a script rather than genuinely responding. There's attraction there, maybe, or the memory of attraction, but it can't develop into anything real because Leon fundamentally doesn't exist in spaces where real relationships happen anymore. He exists in crisis zones and brief respites between crises. There's no room for the kind of sustained, vulnerable, non tactical interaction that real relationships require. The mission itself reinforces Leon's growing awareness that bioterrorism has become industrialized. It's not individual mad scientists anymore. It's networks, black markets, sophisticated distribution systems. Bioweapons are commodities now, bought and sold, constantly evolving. The problem he's been fighting for 16 years hasn't been solved. It's metastasized into something much larger and more intractable. After New York, Leon returns to whatever passes for his normal life: briefings, training, waiting for the next deployment. The cycle continues. Each mission adds new scars but no new meaning. He's the government's most reliable weapon against bioterror threats, deployed with confidence because he always completes the mission. What the mission reports don't capture is that completing mission stopped feeling like accomplishment years ago. Now it's just continuation, survival, momentum without purpose, the performance of normalcy, severity level 3. It's noticeable and creates distance in interactions, but Leon can still function socially when required. He hasn't completely lost the ability to engage with others. He's just lost the ability to do it authentically, to let anyone see what's actually happening beneath the professional competence. Alcatraz and encountering younger versions of trauma. In 2015, Leon is sent to investigate suspicious activity around Alcatraz Island, where a pharmaceutical company has been conducting classified research. The mission brings him into contact with several other operatives and civilians caught in yet another outbreak situation. But what's psychologically significant about Alcatraz isn't just the mission itself. It's watching Leon interact with people who are experiencing their first bioterror incident. There are people on that mission who are terrified, who are shocked by what they're seeing, who can't quite process that the monsters are real and the situation is as bad as it appears, and Leon has to guide them through it, has to be the calm voice of experience, has to project confidence and control to keep others from panicking. Watching someone experience their first bioterror incident is probably like looking into a mirror that shows Leon his 21-year-old self, the rookie cop who drove into Raccoon City with no idea what was waiting. Except Leon can't afford to acknowledge that reflection, can't let himself remember what it felt like to be that overwhelmed and unprepared, because acknowledging it would mean feeling things he's spent 17 years learning not to feel. This creates what I'm calling survivor's temporal displacement, severity level 3 out of 5. Survivor's temporal displacement happens when you exist in such a fundamentally different reality from your past self that you can't quite bridge the gap. The person you were before trauma feels like a stranger, someone you can barely remember being. And when you encounter people who remind you of that past self, people experiencing now what you experienced then, you feel disconnected from your own history, like you're watching your origin story happen to someone else. Leon can't relate to the fear he sees in others because he's buried his own fear so deeply it's inaccessible. He can't offer genuine comfort because he doesn't remember what would have comforted him back in Raccoon City. All he can offer is tactical guidance, how to survive, what to watch for, which weapons work best against which enemies. He's become a manual on bioterror survival, efficient and comprehensive, but he's lost access to the emotional dimensions that would make him actually helpful to people who are emotionally drowning. There's also a growing weariness in Leon's responses during Alcatraz. The one-liners are still there, but they're more reflexive, automatic, like verbal tics rather than genuine attempts at levity. Someone points out that he seems tired, and Leon's response is deflection, another joke that avoids acknowledging the very real exhaustion that's accumulated over 17 years of constant deployment. The mission resolves like they always do, outbreak contained, immediate threat neutralized. Leon survives and moves on, but each mission that follows the same pattern reinforces the Sisyphean nature of his existence. He's pushing the same boulder up the same hill, and it rolls back down, and he pushes it again forever. Survivor's temporal displacement, severity level 3. It's creating emotional distance from his own past and making connection with others increasingly difficult, but it's not completely debilitating yet. Leon can still function as a team leader, can still guide others through crisis. He's just doing it from behind layers of dissociation that make genuine human connection nearly impossible. The Ada problem across 2 decades. We need to talk about Ada Wong because she's the one relationship that persists across Leon's entire adult life, and it's possibly the most psychologically unhealthy attachment he's ever maintained. Their first meeting in Raccoon City established a pattern that's never changed. Ada presents herself as someone Leon can trust, someone working toward the same goals. Leon wants to believe her because he desperately needs allies and because he's attracted to her. Ada uses Leon's trust to accomplish her actual objectives, which always involves stealing bioweapon samples for whoever she's working for. Then she disappears, leaving Leon to deal with the aftermath of having been manipulated. This happens in Raccoon City in 1998. It happens again in Spain in 2004. It happens multiple times during the events of 2013. The pattern is so consistent you'd think Leon would stop falling for it, but he doesn't. Or rather, he knows exactly what's happening. He's not naive anymore, but he keeps engaging with Ada anyway, keeps helping her when their interests align, keeps allowing himself moments of connection that he knows are probably manipulative. This is what I'm calling trauma bonding with an unreliable attachment figure. Severity level 4 out of 5. Trauma bonding occurs when you form attachments to people in high stress situations, especially when those people alternate between helping and harming you. The inconsistency creates a powerful psychological hook. You remember the moments when they helped, when they seemed to care, and those moments keep you attached, even when logic says you should walk away. Ada represents the closest thing Leon has to a consistent relationship in his adult life. She's the only person who's been present intermittently across his entire journey from Raccoon City forward. Everyone else is either dead, moved on, or exists in professional capacities only. Ada is the thread of something that might be personal connection, if either of them were capable of actual personal connection. But the relationship is fundamentally broken. Ada will always prioritize her mission over Leon's safety or feelings. Leon knows this, acknowledges it, and continues engaging with her anyway. Why? Because in a life defined entirely by work and crisis, Ada is the only thing that feels like it might be something else, even if that something else is just a slightly different flavor of dysfunction. Their interactions have an almost ritualistic quality by the time we see them in 2013. Leon makes a cynical comment about Ada's inevitable betrayal. Ada smiles enigmatically and neither confirms nor denies. They work together temporarily. Ada disappears with whatever she came for. Leon is left holding the consequences. Neither of them seems to expect anything different, but they also keep repeating the dance. From a psychological perspective, this represents Leon's complete inability to form healthy attachments. He literally doesn't know what a healthy relationship looks like anymore. His relationship template is someone who lies to him, uses him, and occasionally saves his life, and he's attached to that template because it's the only kind of connection his nervous system recognizes as familiar. There's probably attraction still, physical and emotional, but it's been filtered through so many layers of cynicism and disappointed expectation that it can't develop into anything real. They're two people who might have had something genuine in another life, but in this one, they're just damaged people who recognize damage in each other and mistake that recognition for intimacy. The tragedy of Leon's attachment to Ada is that it prevents him from forming healthier connections with literally anyone else. Ada occupies the relationship space in his psychology even though she's barely present and never available. It's like being in a relationship with a ghost, just substantial enough to prevent you from moving on, never substantial enough to provide actual companionship or support. By the time we see them interacting in 2013, Ada seems almost fond of Leon in her own detached way. She saves his life multiple times when she doesn't strictly need to. She provides weapons and assistance, but she also steals samples that will perpetuate the bioterrorism market, ensuring Leon will have more missions, more crises, more opportunities to die in service of fighting problems that people like Ada help create. It's a closed loop. Leon fights bioterrorism. Ada perpetuates it. Their relationship exists in the space between those contradictions, never resolving, never ending, just continuing until one of them dies. Trauma bonding with an unreliable attachment figure. Severity level 4. It's severe enough to prevent healthy relationship formation and to keep Leon emotionally isolated. But it's not quite maxed out because the attachment isn't actively destructive in the moment to moment sense. Ada's presence in Leon's life doesn't make things worse exactly. It just ensures they never get better, that Leon remains stuck in patterns established when he was 21 and has never developed beyond them. Moral injury and the impossible calculus. We need to address moral injury directly now because it's been accumulating throughout Leon's entire career, and by 2013 it's reached critical levels. Severity level 5 out of 5. Moral injury is distinct from PTSD, though they often occur together. PTSD is about fear and threat response, your nervous system being stuck in survival mode. Moral injury is about having violated your own moral code, having done things or failed to do things that contradict your deepest values. It creates shame, guilt, and self-condemnation that doesn't resolve through normal trauma processing. Leon's moral injury starts the moment he accepts the government's blackmail offer. His core identity was built around being a protector, someone who serves justice and helps people. The government forces him to serve them by threatening a child, and Leon complies. That compliance is morally injurious, even though it's understandable. He's choosing to serve people he doesn't respect to protect someone who needs protecting. Every mission after that adds layers. He works for administrations that destroyed Raccoon City. He follows orders from people like Derek Simmons, who use bioterrorism as a political tool. He operates in legal gray areas, conducting extrajudicial operations in foreign countries, killing people who might be victims of infection or mind control rather than genuine enemies. The infected human problem is particularly morally destructive. In most bioterror incidents, the majority of enemies Leon fights are people who've been infected against their will. They're victims. But they're also threats that have to be neutralized for Leon and others to survive. So Leon kills them. He's killed thousands of infected humans over 2 decades, and every single one represents a moral failure. Not his personal failure, but a systemic failure that he's forced to participate in. There's no good choice in these situations. Let infected humans kill you and others? Unacceptable. Kill infected humans who might have been saved if intervention had come sooner? Morally devastating. Leon chooses survival because he has to, but survival doesn't erase the moral weight of what survival required. The Spain mission added a unique dimension to this moral injury. Leon was infected himself. He knew what it felt like to have something taking over his mind and body, and then after being cured, he went right back to killing other infected people who were experiencing what he'd just escaped. The hypocrisy is inescapable. He deserved to be saved, but they don't. The distinction is purely circumstantial. He was strategically valuable enough to extract and cure. They weren't. By 2013, when Leon discovers that Derek Simmons, a high-ranking government official he ultimately worked under, orchestrated multiple outbreaks that killed tens of thousands of people, the moral injury reaches its apex. Leon hasn't been fighting bioterrorism. He's been serving a government that creates and weaponizes bioterrorism. Every mission he completed successfully strengthen systems that cause the very problems he's trying to solve. This realization that you've been complicit in the thing you thought you were fighting is psychologically annihilating. It means all the moral compromises you made, all the guilt you carried, all the people you failed to save were in service of nothing good. You were never the hero. You were a tool used by villains, and you were too trapped or too naive or too exhausted to recognize it. People experiencing severe moral injury often develop what's called a shattered moral identity. Your sense of yourself as a good person collapses. You can't reconcile who you thought you were with what you've actually done. This leads to profound self loathing, depression, and sometimes complete loss of meaning that makes continued existence feel pointless. Leon shows clear signs of moral injury in his 2013 interactions. His cynicism has deepened into something closer to nihilism. His jokes are darker, more bitter. When Helena talks about her guilt over tall oaks, Leon's responses suggest he's intimately familiar with guilt that doesn't resolve, choices that can't be undone, living with having been complicit in horrors you couldn't prevent. The government's response to the Simmons conspiracy probably made it worse. After exposing a national security advisor's role in global bioterrorism, did the system change? Did policies shift to prevent future abuses? Almost certainly not in any meaningful way. Leon exposed one corrupt official, and the machine kept running, proving that individual accountability doesn't touch structural problems. Moral injury, severity level 5. It's maxed out, completely pervasive, defining how Leon sees himself and his place in the world. He can't see himself as a hero anymore, can't believe his work serves genuinely good purposes, can't escape the knowledge that he's been complicit in systems that create the suffering he fights against. The only thing keeping him functional is compartmentalization, putting the moral questions in a box and focusing purely on immediate tactical objectives. Save this person, stop this outbreak. Don't think about the larger meanings, just do the next thing. But compartmentalization isn't healing, it's just delayed collapse. And the box where Leon's been storing all his moral injury for 20 plus years is getting very full. Vendetta and the mirror of self destruction. In 2014, Leon is pulled into another bioterror incident, this one involving Glenn Arias, a arms dealer seeking revenge by developing a new virus that can be controlled and triggered remotely. Leon works alongside Chris Redfield again, and their partnership reveals just how similarly damaged they both are despite their different approaches. Chris has become obsessed with eliminating bioterrorism, throwing himself into mission after mission with the same compulsive intensity Leon shows. The difference is that Chris still seems to believe the fight matters, that winning enough battles will eventually win the war. Leon appears to have stopped believing that somewhere along the way. There's a scene where Leon is drinking heavily before a mission. This is significant. Functional alcoholism is an extremely common response to moral injury and complex PTSD, especially in military and law enforcement populations. Alcohol numbs the hypervigilance, temporarily quiets the intrusive thoughts, makes sleep possible when your nervous system won't let you rest. Leon's drinking isn't portrayed as a serious problem, more as character color, but from a psychological perspective, it's a massive red flag. He's self medicating for symptoms he's never addressed, using alcohol to manage PTSD and moral injury that should be treated professionally. The fact that he's drinking before missions suggests his tolerance has increased to the point where he needs alcohol to feel baseline normal. This is what I'm calling active self-medication for untreated complex trauma. Severity level 4 out of 5. People self-medicate when they can't access proper treatment or when they don't believe treatment will help. Given Leon's position in classified government operations, he probably can't seek normal therapy. How do you process trauma from classified missions without disclosing classified information? And even if he could access treatment, would he trust it? The government controls his employment. Any therapist he saw would likely report back to his superiors. Showing psychological weakness could mean being removed from duty, which might mean losing his ability to protect people, which is the only thing that still gives his existence meaning. So Leon drinks instead. He self medicates, manages symptoms enough to remain functional, and doesn't address the underlying conditions that make medication necessary. This works in the short term but causes progressive damage. Alcohol interferes with REM sleep, which is crucial for processing trauma. It can worsen depression and anxiety over time. It creates physical health problems that compound psychological ones. The vendetta mission itself follows familiar patterns. Leon fights through infected enemies, faces bioweapons, ultimately stops Arias's plan. He survives. Chris survives. The immediate threat is neutralized, but the mission is notable for what it shows about Leon's combat behavior. He's more reckless than he used to be, taking risks that seem almost suicidal. When Chris calls him out on it, Leon deflects with humor, but the recklessness speaks to something darker. People with severe moral injury and complex PTSD sometimes develop what researchers call passive suicidal ideation. They're not actively trying to kill themselves, but they're not particularly invested in survival anymore either. They take risks they shouldn't, put themselves in unnecessary danger, operate with a kind of fatalistic acceptance that if they die, that's probably fine. Leon's behavior during Vendetta suggests he's crossed into this territory. He still completes the mission, still protects others, but his own survival seems almost incidental. He's going through the motions of self preservation reflexively, not because he particularly cares about staying alive. Chris serves as a mirror in this mission, showing Leon what he looks like from the outside, someone consumed by the work, unable to stop, fighting the war with the same methods, expecting different results. Chris is still idealistic enough to think it matters. Leon has passed beyond that into pure motion without meaning. Active self medication for untreated complex trauma, severity level 4. It's severe enough to create additional health risks and prevent genuine healing, but not quite maxed out because Leon's substance use hasn't yet completely compromised his effectiveness. He can still do the job, which means he can avoid confronting why he needs substances to do it. Identity erosion and the question of who remains. By the late 2010s, Leon has been doing this work for roughly 20 years. He's in his early 40s. And if you look at him during this period, there's a hollowness that wasn't there even in 2013. The competence is still there. He's probably at peak effectiveness in terms of combat skills and tactical knowledge. But there's something missing behind the eyes, some essential quality that makes a person feel present in their own life. This is what I'm calling complete identity erosion. Severity level 5 out of 5. Remember that Leon's civilian identity was destroyed before it ever fully formed. He never got to be the police officer he trained to become. That potential self died in Raccoon City. What replaced it was a government agent identity that was forced on him through coercion, built on trauma, and refined through 20 years of constant crisis exposure. But here's the thing about identities built entirely from trauma and work: they're hollow, they're functional, but not fulfilling. They let you operate effectively in your role, but they don't give you a sense of self that exists independent of that role. Who is Leon Kennedy when he's not on a mission? We don't know. He probably doesn't know. There's no Leon outside the work, no hobbies we see, no friends beyond professional contacts, no interest beyond staying combat ready for the next deployment. His entire existence has been absorbed into his function, and his function is fighting bioterrorism until he dies. This is the logical endpoint of 20 plus years of chronic trauma, untreated PTSD, moral injury, coerced service, and identity built entirely from crisis response. You become a hollow person, highly functional within specific parameters, but empty of any genuine sense of who you are beyond those parameters. People experiencing complete identity erosion often report feeling like they're watching their life happen from outside, like their characters being piloted rather than people actually living. Actions feel automatic, predetermined. There's no sense of choice or genuine agency, just the performance of whatever your role requires. Leon's one liners and casual demeanor probably mask this erosion most of the time. He can still perform normalcy well enough that people don't realize there's nothing behind the performance. But in unguarded moments, when he's alone, when a mission ends, and there's brief, empty space before the next assignment, the hollowness must be overwhelming. There's a philosophical concept called thrownness from existential philosophy, the idea that we're thrown into existence without choosing our circumstances and have to make meaning despite that. Leon was thrown into Raccoon City, then thrown into government service, then thrown into mission after mission after mission. He never got to choose who he became. It was all response, reaction, adaptation to circumstances he didn't create and couldn't escape. And after 20 years of that, what's left? A highly competent bioterrorism specialist with no life outside his specialization, no relationships beyond tactical partnerships, no sense of future beyond the next crisis. He's become exactly what the government needed him to be: a reliable weapon that doesn't question orders, doesn't break under pressure, and doesn't require maintenance beyond the occasional drink to stay functional. The tragedy is that Leon probably can't even recognize this as tragic anymore. Tragedy requires perspective, the ability to step outside your situation and see it clearly. Leon's been inside the situation for so long that it's not situation anymore, it's just reality. This is what life is. This is what he is. The possibility that it could be different probably doesn't even register as a real possibility anymore. Complete identity erosion, severity level 5. There's no self left independent of the work. Leon has become his function, and his function is all he is. This is the final stage of what began in Raccoon City: the complete absorption of person into role, the destruction of individuality by systems that need tools, not humans, the later missions and mechanical continuation. After 2014, Leon continues working anti bioterrorism operations into the 2020s. The specific missions vary, but the pattern doesn't. Outbreak occurs. Leon is deployed. Leon neutralizes the threat. Leon survives and moves to the next assignment. By this point, his approach to missions is almost mechanical. He's refined every aspect of bioterror response into practiced efficiency. He knows which weapons work best against which creatures. He knows how to read environments for threats. He knows the likely plot beats of conspiracy and betrayal because he's lived through them dozens of times. There are no surprises anymore, just variations on familiar themes. This mechanical competence looks impressive from outside, but psychologically it represents something darker. When your trauma response becomes your normal operating mode, when crisis management becomes your baseline, you've essentially given up on ever living a non crisis existence. You've accepted that this is all there is and you've optimized yourself for it. People who work in sustained, high trauma environments long term often develop what researchers call compassion fatigue or emotional numbing. You stop feeling the weight of each individual tragedy because feeling it would make the work impossible. You process suffering as tactical data rather than human experience. This person is infected. They need to be neutralized becomes the thought process, not this was someone's father, mother, child who deserved better. Leon's later mission behaviors suggest advanced compassion fatigue. He still protects civilians when possible, still completes rescue objectives, but there's a detachment to it. He's going through motions he's performed hundreds of times, executing procedures, not engaging emotionally with the human dimensions of what's happening around him. This detachment is protective. It keeps him functional, but it also completes his isolation. He can't connect with the people he saves because he can't afford to feel the weight of their trauma when he's carrying decades of his own unprocessed trauma. He can't celebrate victories because victories don't feel like victories anymore, just temporary pauses in an endless cycle. There's also the physical toll to consider. Leon is in his 40s now, doing work that destroys young soldiers in their 20s. The accumulated injuries, the repetitive stress of combat, the years of poor sleep and self medication, all of it adds up to a body that's breaking down faster than it should. He probably has chronic pain that he ignores or medicates through. His recovery time from injuries is probably longer than it used to be, but he keeps going because what else would he do? He has no other identity, no other skills that translate to civilian life, no support network outside the anti-bioterrorism field. Retirement would mean facing everything he's been avoiding for 20 plus years, and that's literally unthinkable. The work keeps him moving, gives structure to existence, prevents the complete psychological collapse that would probably happen if he stopped. This is the grim reality of what happens when someone experiences catastrophic early trauma and then never gets proper treatment, just continuous re traumatization for decades. They become incredibly functional within the traumatic environment, but completely unable to exist outside it. The trauma becomes their life, not something that happened to them, but the very structure of their existence. Leon at this stage is a perfect example of sustained functioning despite severe psychological damage. He passes all the professional competency evaluations. He completes every mission. From the government's perspective, he's their greatest success. An agent who's been fully reliable for over 2 decades, who never breaks, never quits, never compromises mission effectiveness. From a psychological perspective, he's a walking catastrophe, a person who should have received intensive trauma treatment 20 years ago and instead got sent back into the same situations that traumatized him originally, over and over, until the trauma became his entire identity. The protector who couldn't save himself throughout all of this across every mission, every year, every accumulated trauma. One thing has remained constant: Leon's compulsion to protect people. It's the core of who he is, the one element of his original identity that survived Raccoon City and all the corruption that followed. But there's bitter irony in someone spending decades protecting others while being completely unable to protect himself. Leon saves countless lives. He stops bioterror incidents that would have killed millions. He rescues hostages, extracts assets, evacuates civilians. His protection of others is comprehensive and effective. His protection of himself is non existent. He doesn't protect his own mental health. He doesn't protect his own boundaries. He doesn't protect himself from systems that exploit and damage him. He doesn't protect his own right to a life beyond crisis response. Every protective instinct gets directed outward, and nothing is reserved for self-preservation beyond the physical, tactical level. This is what I'm calling the protector's self-destruction paradox. Severity level 5 out of 5. People with strong protector identities often struggle with self-care because protecting themselves feels selfish compared to protecting others. If you have to choose between your needs and someone else's, you choose theirs every time. And over years, this creates a pattern where you're completely depleted, running on empty, held together by willpower and obligation rather than any genuine resource. Leon exemplifies this completely. He shows up for everyone else, for Ashley, for Helena, for every civilian caught in outbreaks he responds to. He never shows up for himself. He never says, I need help, or I can't do this anymore, or the cost of this work is too high. He just keeps going, keeps sacrificing, keeps protecting others while he slowly destroys himself through neglect and accumulated damage. The protector's self-destruction paradox is particularly tragic because it means the people who give the most, who save the most lives, who matter the most to others' survival, are often the ones most at risk of complete breakdown. They'll give everything to everyone else until there's nothing left, and then they'll give more, pulling from reserves that don't exist, damaging themselves fundamentally because they can't conceive of prioritizing their own needs. For Leon, this paradox has operated for over 20 years. Every mission where he protected others but took damage himself. Every time he accepted a dangerous assignment because people needed him, even though accepting it cost him pieces of his sanity. Every moment he chose to keep functioning rather than address his deteriorating mental health, because addressing it would mean not being available to protect others. By now, the damage is likely irreversible. 20 years of complex PTSD without treatment doesn't just go away if you finally get help. 20 years of moral injury doesn't resolve with a few therapy sessions. The neural pathways are set. The trauma responses are automatic. The identity erosion is complete. Leon saved thousands of people across his career. He couldn't save himself. That's the protector's self-destruction paradox in its purest form. Comprehensive effectiveness at protecting others, comprehensive failure at self-protection, and no ability to recognize that self-protection should have been a priority all along. Protector self-destruction, paradox, severity level 5. It's completely defining, operating at the core of every choice Leon makes, ensuring that he'll keep sacrificing himself until there's nothing left to sacrifice. What remains after everything burns? So where does that leave us? We've tracked Leon Kennedy from an optimistic 21-year-old rookie cop through 20 plus years of continuous trauma, coerced service, moral injury, identity erosion, and self-destruction in service of protecting others. We've seen him go from someone with dreams and plans and a future to someone who exists purely as function, a weapon aimed at bioterrorism until he breaks completely or dies in action. The psychological damage is comprehensive. Complex PTSD at severity level 5, completely pervasive, defining every aspect of how his nervous system responds to the world. Moral injury at severity level 5, unable to see himself as good anymore, carrying guilt that can't be resolved. Identity erosion at severity level 5, no self remaining outside his role, complete absorption of person into function, catastrophic initialization trauma, involuntary servitude trauma, loss of bodily autonomy, horror, cumulative deployment trauma, existential futility, trauma bonding with unreliable attachment figures, active self-medication for untreated conditions, the protector's self-destruction paradox, layer after layer of psychological damage, none of it properly addressed, all of it compounding into a picture of someone who should not still be functional, but who remains functional through mechanisms that are themselves destructive. What's remarkable about Leon isn't that he's damaged. Anyone with his history would be devastated. What's remarkable is that he's maintained any humanity at all, that he still tries to protect people, that he hasn't become either a complete monster or a complete shell. That thin thread of caring about individuals, if not systems, about immediate people in front of him, if not abstract causes, is maybe the only thing that differentiates Leon from the villains he fights. Simmons probably told himself he was protecting national security when he orchestrated outbreaks. The difference is Simmons saw people as abstractions, acceptable losses in larger strategies. Leon still sees people as people, still values individual lives even when he can't value his own. But that thread is thin and fraying. Each mission pulls it a little more. Each betrayal, each systemic failure, each moral compromise required by his role, all of it, strains the basic humanity that keeps him from complete nihilistic collapse. If Leon lives long enough to retire, if he somehow survives until his body can't do the work anymore, the aftermath will be catastrophic. All the trauma he's been outrunning for decades will catch up at once. Without the work structuring his existence, without crises demanding his attention, he'll have nothing but empty space and decades of unprocessed horror. The transition from constant deployment to civilian life destroys many combat veterans, even when they have support systems, families, treatment resources. Leon has none of those. He has professional contacts, tactical partnerships, and a relationship with Ada that's barely a relationship. When the work ends, he'll have nothing. This is the trajectory Resident Evil has created with Leon Kennedy, a beloved character whose arc is actually a slow motion tragedy, a comprehensive demonstration of what happens when someone experiences severe trauma and then never gets help, just continuous re traumatization until they're destroyed from the inside while maintaining a functional exterior. He's not a power fantasy, he's a warning. This is what it actually looks like when someone fights bioterrorism for decades. Not heroism without cost, but comprehensive psychological destruction that leaves you functional but hollow, capable but broken, alive but not really living. Leon S. Kennedy is one of gaming's most psychologically complex characters because his complexity comes from damage, from systems that use people up and discard them, from trying to maintain humanity in contexts designed to destroy it. He's a character study in trauma, moral injury, and the ultimate futility of individual heroism when the systems you serve are themselves corrupt. And the most tragic part, he'll keep going, keep taking the next mission, keep protecting the next person, keep fighting the next outbreak, because it's all he knows how to do, all he is anymore, and stopping would mean facing everything he's been running from since that first night in Raccoon City when his entire future burned down around him. That's Leon Kennedy, not a hero, a survivor who never stopped surviving long enough to heal, now so damaged that survival is all he has left.